Let me back up. Sarah is not a character I invented. She's not a composite or an archetype or a convenient stand-in for the struggles of a generation. Sarah is a real person who lives in a real apartment on West 26th Street in Manhattan. And on October 22nd, 2024, at 3:52 a.m., she picked up her phone and did what she'd done thousands of mornings before. No rush. At 11:47 p.m. on a Monday. Got it. I'll take a look first thing and send over revised numbers. Get some sleep. Not the version she narrated at networking events and holiday parties and awkward catch-up calls with college friends who still lived in the same town they'd grown up in and couldn't understand why she never visited anymore. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. She'd done everything right. She had everything she'd ever wanted, everything she'd worked for, everything she'd been told would make her feel whole.
Just a kind of quiet resignation, like she'd agreed to a subscription service she did remember signing up for and could figure out how to cancel. The shower was hot. Almost too hot. She knew this because she'd counted them before, many times on many Tuesday mornings. She thought about calling in sick, just for today. She didn't call in sick. She got dressed in the black theory blazer and the slim-cut trousers and the loafers that cost more than her first month's rent and still managed to hurt her feet by noon. She made the cold brew that was 2 days old and bitter drank half of it standing at the counter, poured the rest down the sink. Here's what I need you to understand about Sarah and about the thousands of people like her who wake up every morning in cities across this country and do the same thing she did. Let me tell you about a study. In 2014, researchers at Harvard asked 1,500 working adults to describe their typical morning routine. They collected the data, analyzed the responses, and published their findings in a journal that most people will never read. Here's what they discovered. The average professional checks their phone within 5 minutes of waking up. Not 5 minutes after they get out of bed. Not 5 minutes after they've had coffee and brushed their teeth and oriented themselves to the day. 5 minutes of being conscious. 300 seconds.
Ever seen someone who looks like they have it all? The perfect job, the fancy title, the city apartment with a view? That was Sarah. On paper, she was the definition of success. Senior account director at a top-tier marketing agency. Her LinkedIn profile was a highlight reel of promotions and industry awards. Her friends saw her as the one who'd made it, the one who was always jetting off to another client meeting, another conference, another celebration dinner. But behind the perfectly curated Instagram posts and the confident smile, Sarah was running on empty. Her day started not with the sunrise, but with the blue light of her phone. 6 a.m. The first thing she saw wasn't her partner's face, but a cascade of emails that had flooded in overnight from different time zones. Before her feet even hit the floor, her mind was already in the office, troubleshooting a campaign issue for a client in London, approving a budget for a team in Singapore. The pressure was a constant hum, a background noise to her life that never quite faded. Breakfast was a protein bar eaten while scrolling through Slack messages. Her commute was spent on back-to-back calls, her voice a smooth professional mask that hid the exhaustion creeping into her bones. At the office, the pace was relentless. Meetings bled into one another, each one demanding more of her energy, more of her strategic thinking, more of her. She was a master at her job, a brilliant problem solver who could charm the most difficult clients and inspire her team to pull off impossible deadlines. She thrived on the adrenaline, or at least she used to. Lately, the wins felt hollow. Landing a massive new account used to feel like a jolt of pure electricity. Now it just felt like the starting pistol for another marathon she didn't have the energy to run. The praise from her boss, the bonuses, the promotions, they were like candy that had lost its sweetness. They gave a momentary rush but left her feeling even emptier than before. She was climbing a ladder, but she'd forgotten to ask herself if it was leaning against the right wall. Evenings offered no real escape. The expectation to be always on was unspoken but absolute. Dinner plans were often canceled for a last-minute client fire. When she was home, her laptop was her constant companion. She'd be half watching a show with her partner, but her mind was replaying a difficult conversation or mentally drafting an email. The line between work Sarah and just Sarah had blurred so much that just Sarah barely existed anymore. She was a director, a strategist, a mentor, but who was she when she wasn't any of those things? The question scared her.
One Tuesday night, it all came to a head. She was working late, of course, putting the final touches on a massive presentation for the next morning. The city lights twinkled outside her window, a beautiful, lonely tapestry.
She looked at the slide deck, a culmination of weeks of sleepless nights and relentless effort. It was perfect, and she felt nothing. Not pride, not relief, just a profound, aching void. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, smudging her makeup. For the first time she allowed herself to admit the truth. "I'm not happy." It was a simple sentence, but it felt like an earthquake. For years, she had equated achievement with happiness. Success was the goal, and she had achieved it. So why did it feel like a failure? She realized she'd been chasing a version of success that society had sold her, one defined by titles and paychecks, not by passion or peace. She had been so busy being productive that she'd forgotten how to be present. She had connected with clients all over the world, but had disconnected from the one person who mattered most, herself. That night, Sarah didn't finish the presentation. She closed her laptop, took a long, deep breath, and just sat in the silence of her apartment. It was uncomfortable at first, the quiet. Her mind screamed at her to get back to work, to not let the team down, but she resisted. She watched the city lights, not as a backdrop to her work, but just as lights. The next morning she walked into her boss's office and did something she never thought she would. She asked for help, not for a project, but for herself. She requested a leave of absence. Sarah's story isn't unique. In our hyper-connected, productivity-obsessed world, so many of us are burning out while chasing a dream that isn't really ours. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor and mistake being busy for being important. But true success isn't about how much you can endure. It's about building a life that truly sustains you. It's about having the courage to stop, to question the path you're on, and to redefine what winning actually means to you. Sarah's journey to rediscover herself was just beginning, but in that moment of vulnerability, she had already taken the most successful step of her career. What about you? Thanks for watching. Sarah looked at her succulent, brown at the edges, drooping slightly to the left. She couldn't remember the last time she'd watered it. Here's the question I need to leave you with, not the one Sarah asked herself. Why do I keep winning and feel like I'm losing? But the one underneath it, the one she was too exhausted to ask, too conditioned to avoid, too deep in the machinery of her own life to even recognize as a question. What if I'm winning the wrong game? What if the corner office and the promotion and the view of the park aren't the prize, but the distraction? What if the 3:47 a.m. email checks and the 17 resolved messages and the carefully maintained facade of having everything under control aren't evidence of success, but symptoms of surrender? What if Sarah has been running for so long that she forgot what she's running toward? She closed her laptop at 6:23, later than she'd planned, earlier than usual. She packed her bag, slipped her phone into her coat pocket, walked past her boss's office and the creative director's office, and the empty conference room where she'd spent countless hours preparing presentations that would be forgotten the moment they ended. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. The doors closed. The descent from the 31st floor took 47 seconds. 47 seconds of silence and fluorescent light, and her own reflection in the polished metal doors. She looked tired. She looked older than 29. She looked like someone who'd spent 7 years building a life, and only just realized she'd never asked herself if it was the life she wanted to build. The doors opened. She walked through the lobby, past the security desk and the potted plants and the giant digital screen displaying the company's latest campaign. She pushed through the glass doors and emerged onto the sidewalk, into the cold October air, into the city that never stopped demanding her attention. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. She stood there for a moment, on the corner of 42nd Street and 6th Avenue, watching the taxis stream past and the commuters hurry home and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't check it. She thought about the succulent on her windowsill, the text from her mom she still hadn't replied to, the novel she'd been meaning to read, the bakery she'd been meaning to try, the life she'd been meaning to live somewhere between the emails and the meetings and the relentless machinery of her own achievement. Her phone buzzed a third time. She didn't check it, and for the first time in 7 years, Sarah allowed herself to ask the question she'd been running from since the day she walked across that stage in Washington Square Park, and convinced herself that the path ahead was clear and straight and bright. What do I actually want? She didn't have an answer. Not yet. Not standing on the corner of 42nd and 6th with her phone buzzing in her pocket and her cold brew long finished and her entire carefully constructed life waiting for her to return to it. But she asked the question. That was the important part. She finally asked the question, and the question once asked refuses to be unasked. This is where we begin, not with answers, not with solutions, not with a 5-step plan to reclaim your mornings and optimize your productivity, and finally figure out how to have it all. We begin with the question. The one you've been avoiding, the one you drown out with notifications and deadlines, and the comfortable hum of busyness, the one that wakes you up at 3:47 a.m. and waits patiently in the dark, pulsing green, refusing to be ignored. What do I actually want? Not what you're supposed to want, not what you've been trained to want, not what your parents want for you or your boss expects from you or your carefully curated social media presence projects to the world. What do you actually want? Sarah didn't know, not yet. But she was standing on a street corner in Manhattan at 6:31 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, and her phone was buzzing in her pocket, and she wasn't answering it. That's not a solution. That's not a transformation. That's not even a small victory, not really. It's just a crack, a tiny fracture in the wall she'd spent 7 years building, a sliver of light finding its way through. But cracks don't stay small, and once the light gets in, it's almost impossible to put it back out. Sarah's phone buzzed again. She let it buzz. Then she turned left, toward the subway, toward home, toward the succulent on her windowsill that she was going to water tonight, if it was the last thing she did. She didn't have the answer yet, but she had the question, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The glow of the MacBook screen painted Sarah's face blue. It was 11:47 on a Tuesday night in March, and her apartment on West 26th Street had gone quiet, except for the hum of the ancient radiator and the click-click-click of her mechanical keyboard. She'd been staring at the same quarterly report for 43 minutes, her eyes burning, her third mug of cold brew sitting untouched and sweaty on the marble counter. She was 29 years old. She had a corner office on the 31st floor overlooking Bryant Park. She managed a team of 12, and she felt, deep in her chest, like she was drowning in slow motion. The cursor blinked again. Her phone buzzed face down on the desk. She didn't flip it over. She already knew it was Marcus from Creative, asking for revisions she'd asked for 3 days ago. Or maybe it was her mom, texting another photo of the puppy Sarah didn't have time to visit. Or maybe it was just Duolingo, reminding her she hadn't practiced Spanish in 2 weeks. Didn't matter. She'd answer it in 5 minutes, or 10, or whenever her brain stopped feeling like static.
Here's the thing about Sarah, she wasn't lazy. Lazy people don't get promoted 3 times in 4 years. Lazy people don't cry in the bathroom at 2 p.m. because they forgot to eat lunch again and then go back to their desk and close 3 deals before dinner. Sarah was the opposite of lazy. She was a machine. That was the problem. Machines don't ask why. Machines don't stop to wonder if they running toward the right thing or just running because stopping feels like failure. Sarah had spent her entire 20s building a version of success that looked perfect from the outside. The apartment with the exposed brick. The job title her college friends stumbled over when they introduced her at weddings. The ability to say, "I'm so busy," in a way that sounded like bragging instead of bleeding. But here's what nobody tells you about becoming a machine. Machines don't get to rest. They just run until something breaks. I met Sarah 3 years ago at a networking event at a rooftop bar in the financial district. She was wearing a Black Theory blazer and holding a club soda with lime, making eye contact like she was trying to memorize everyone's face for a deposition. We exchanged cards, sent the obligatory LinkedIn follow, and then disappeared into our respective silos of ambition. So when she called me on a Thursday afternoon last October, not texted, called, I knew something had shifted. "Can I ask you something weird?" Her voice sounded thin, like she'd been crying in the Uber before she dialed. "Sure, why do I keep winning and feel like I'm losing?" The radiator in her apartment hadn't stopped hissing since I walked in. It was one of those old pre-war buildings where the heat operates on a logic known only to the building itself blasting in November, dead in February. She sat on the edge of her gray velvet couch, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold, wearing an oversized Columbia sweatshirt I suspected belonged to an ex-boyfriend she never returned. I closed the Henderson account yesterday, she said. Biggest deal of my career. My boss called me a rock star in the all-hands meeting. Everyone clapped. I went home and cried in the shower for an hour. She looked up at me. What is wrong with me? Here's the answer I gave her. And here's what I need you to understand. Nothing was wrong with Sarah. She wasn't depressed. At least not clinically. She wasn't burned out. At least not yet. She wasn't lazy, ungrateful, broken, or weak. She was trapped. Not by her boss, or her commute, or her impossible deadlines. She was trapped by a lie she'd believed for so long it had fossilized into identity. The lie was this: asterisk, my value is measured by my output. Asterisk, it sounds obvious when you say it out loud. It sounds like something you'd read on a coffee mug or a Pinterest board. But lies don't lose their power just because they're obvious. They lose their power when you catch them in the act. And Sarah's lie was working overtime. Let me show you what I mean. I want you to picture something. It's 7:15 on a Wednesday morning. Sarah's alarm went off 30 minutes ago, but she's been awake since 6:52, scrolling Instagram with her phone propped on the pillow next to her. The light is blue and cold against her face. She is watching a girl in a mustard yellow dress do a morning routine in a house with white walls and a coffee machine that costs more than Sarah's rent. The girl grinds her own beans. She has a ceramic milk pitcher. She smiles like the sun. Sarah puts her phone down, picks it up, opens her work email. 15 unread. She answers 3 before her feet touch the floor. The radiator clicks and groans, warming up for another day of unpredictable service. The coffee she makes is rushed, bitter, half-drunk. She's answering another email while she waits for the subway. Her thumb tapping against the glass, the train's screech drowning out the voice memo from her best friend she keeps meaning to reply to. By 9 a.m., Sarah has already responded to 27 messages, put out 2 fires, and moved 3 projects forward. By 9 a.m., Sarah has also consumed approximately 0 seconds of silence, 0 minutes of presence, and 0 awareness that she hasn't taken a single breath that wasn't tea in service of a task. This is not a morning routine. This is a feeding tube for a parasite. The parasite doesn't look like a parasite. It looks like productivity, it looks like hustle. It wears a nice blazer and answers emails at 6:47 a.m. and calls it asterisk getting ahead asterisk. But here's what parasites do. They consume the host's energy while convincing the host they in control. Sarah believed genuinely that checking her email first thing in the morning was responsible. It was proactive. It was getting the jump on the day. What she didn't realize, what almost nobody realizes, is that every single email she opened was a tiny theft. Each subject line stole a piece of her attention. Each request stole a fragment of her focus. By the time she walked through the glass doors of her office building, she wasn't entering the arena as a warrior. She was entering as a responder, a cleaner, a firefighter. She spent the first hour of her best brain-reel estate putting out fires that other people had set. And she called it winning. There's a study I want you to know about. It comes from a researcher named Dr. Gloria Mark at the University of California, Irvine. She spent years tracking how knowledge workers actually spend their time. Here's what she found. The average professional switches tasks every 3 minutes and 5 seconds. 3 minutes, 5 seconds. That's not working. That's pinball. You're not the player, you're the ball, getting bounced from one flipper to the next, making noise and lights while someone else keeps score.
I want to tell you a story about a woman named Sarah. Maybe you'll see a bit of yourself in her. But here's the part that really breaks my heart. I said, You're not failing because you're lazy. What if, I continued, the villain isn't your discipline? Is it? I asked it gently. It means, I said, that if you're always responding, you never have to initiate. I want to pause here and ask you something. It might be uncomfortable, and I'm sorry. What? I asked. I laughed. And? I think I've been working against myself. I want you to look at your own life for a second. Not your to-do list, not your inbox. Your attention is your life. Thanks for watching. I hope this gave you something to think about. If it did, feel free to subscribe for more. See you next time.